What if a single careless whisper could threaten to unravel a lifetime of goodwill, and a single, unexpected act could restore it? Imagine a grand ballroom dripping in crystal chandeliers and midnight blue silk, where the world's most powerful philanthropists gather under gilded arches to display their wealth and influence. Invitations arrive on hand-pressed parchment, and mere attendance proclaims your status among royalty. Yet tonight, amidst the murmur of silk gowns and the gleam of pearl-lined capes, one woman's cutting remark, meant to shame a casually dressed stranger, sparks a silent ripple through the glittering crowd. Who is he, this man in jeans and a black t-shirt, whose quiet confidence cuts through the pretense? Stay with us as the evening's auction unfolds, revealing how dignified restraint and genuine generosity can outshine even the brightest diamonds. And when Prince William himself steps forward to recognize an act of kindness unseen and unpublicized, you'll discover why true power lies not in prominence, but in the quiet compassion that redefines an entire legacy. The grand ballroom of Buckingham Hall had never appeared more magnificent. From the moment guests entered through the carved oak doors, they were greeted by walls draped in midnight blue silk that shimmered like starlight under the cathedral ceiling. Towering crystal chandeliers hung in perfect symmetry, each cut-glass prism catching the light of hundreds of candles and casting dancing reflections across gilded pilasters. A trio of harpists tucked into an alcove played a lilting prelude whose notes floated on the air, mingling with the soft rustle of designer gowns and the muted footfalls of polished dress shoes on marble floors. At the room's center, a seven-tier champagne fountain spilled its golden arc into polished silver fountains below, each effervescent drop illuminated by recessed floor lighting. Nearby, tables draped in ivory damask held crystal decanters of vintage champagne, and butlers in tailcoats circulated among guests, offering delicate flutes and discreet service. Along the perimeter, life-sized portraits of past royal patrons hung in ornate frames, their painted visages gazing benevolently upon the crowd. The air was tinged with the scent of jasmine and gardenia from the orchid arrangements at every corner, and the quiet hum of quiet conversation buzzed with the promise of high-stakes philanthropy and whispered alliances. Outside, the Grand Motor Court offered its own spectacle. Bentleys and Rolls-Royces glided across cobblestones slick from the evening mist, their polished chrome reflecting the soft glow of lanterns hung from wrought iron brackets. At each vehicle's arrival, red-carpeted steps rolled out, and waiting footmen opened coach doors for guests whose invitations were sealed in wax. The very act of stepping from chauffeur to ballroom was a ceremony of status, signaling membership in an exclusive circle where generosity and power intertwined like the embroidery on a duchess's sleeve. Inside, anticipation thrummed like electricity. Tonight was the annual Royal Horizon Gala, hosted by His Royal Highness Prince William to raise funds for global educational initiatives. Attendance was by invitation only, hand-pressed parchment sealed with gold leaf and delivered by diplomatic courier. To receive such an invitation was to be recognized among the world's most influential philanthropists, heads of state, tech moguls, and celebrities whose very presence conveyed approval of the Crown's charitable mission. Media roamed the fringes of the room, delighting in capturing every glittering moment, cameras' flashes punctuating the soft torchlight like a constellation of shooting stars. Among the gilded throng moved Lady Claire von Sinclair, known throughout Europe's social registers as both a major patron of the arts and an uncompromising arbiter of protocol. Her silver gown, custom-tailored to hug every contour, was hand-woven with tiny pearls that caught the candlelight in a steady shimmer. A pearl-lined cape draped her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight, and her blonde hair, pinned in a precise chignon, was crowned with a diamond tiara borrowed from the royal vault. As she navigated the entrance hall, she offered brief, practiced smiles to the press, each photograph carefully composed to broadcast her status. Inside, however, her mind was already calculating seating charts, gauging which table would place her closest to the prince and which benefactor might outshine her own pledge. With a final adjustment of a satin glove, Lady Claire Vaughan stepped beneath a soaring marble archway into the heart of the ballroom. Her heels clicked in measured cadence, announcing her arrival to those within earshot. She paused to survey the scene. Table 1, under the largest chandelier, was already claimed by a circle of royal dignitaries and longtime patrons whose generous donations had underwritten entire wings of hospitals and universities. Beyond them, rows of chairs faced a raised dais where Prince William would soon address the audience. Each chair bore a place card edged in gold filigree, an unspoken hierarchy declared by name alone. And then, at the periphery of her vision, she spotted him. Standing beneath a side arch, waiting with quiet calm, was a man in plain dark jeans, a fitted black t-shirt, and unadorned sneakers. No tailored suit, no polished cufflinks, nothing but the stark contrast of simplicity amid ornate surroundings. His expression was serene, unhurried, as he waited to be scanned by the guest registration staff. Lady Claire Vaughan's brow furrowed at the sight. Somewhere in the palace protocol manual, there must have been a clause against casual attire. She stepped forward, curiosity sharpening her tone, intending to inquire whether the man had been misdirected. But before she could intervene, his invitation beeped as valid. With a small nod from the registrar, he passed beneath the velvet rope and crossed into the ballroom. Claire Vaughan's lips tightened into a practiced smile as she swept past him toward her seat. Yet the stranger's quiet confidence tugged at the edge of her thoughts. Who was this casual interloper granted the same priority as she? As she reached the row of seats, the orchestra's final measure faded into polite applause. The conductor raised his baton once more, and the changing notes signaled the start of the evening's program. Claire Vaughan slipped into her chair, her gown's train whispering against the marble floor, and prepared to reaffirm her place at the pinnacle of charitable society. Beside her, the stranger took his seat without hesitation. Claire Vaughan spared only a glacé, noting his blank place card edged only in gold trim, the absence of a name both baffling and irksome. She raised an eyebrow at the unspoken affront, then schooled her features into the mask of serene composure. Tonight, she would shine as always, bidding fiercely at the auction, offering pearls of wisdom during the toasts, and ensuring her name echoed in every headline. Yet as the lights dimmed for Prince William's entrance, Claire Vaughan could feel the stranger's quiet certainty at her side, a silent question that unsettled even the most meticulously rehearsed patrician. And in that moment, amid cascades of crystal and silk, she sensed that the evening's true contest had only just begun. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers bathed the grand ballroom in a warm, honeyed light as Lady Claire Vaughan Sinclair settled in her seat at table 1, her silver gown shimmering like quicksilver beneath the lights. The orchestra's final chord faded, replaced by murmurs of anticipation as guests prepared for Prince William's opening remarks. In that charged hush, every rustle of satin, every metallic fingernail tapping crystal seemed amplified. Claire Vaughan allowed her gaze to drift across the room, reaffirming her mastery of the social landscape. To her left, ambassadors and tech magnates flashed polite smiles. To her right, duchesses in jewel-toned silks whispered amongst themselves, and directly opposite, a row of framed place cards glowed with gilt names, each one a testament to a lifetime of cultivated status. Then, from the corner of the room came a quieter, but no less piercing sound, the faint click of sneakers against marble, a subtle rhythm that drew all eyes away from the dais. The man in the black t-shirt rose from his chair and moved toward the edge of the stage, a simple silhouette marked by casual grace. Claire Vaughan's breath caught. She watched as he approached the microphone stand, unannounced, uninvited by protocol, and touched the base of the mic with a single finger, his posture serene, commanding no spotlight. Cameras pivoted in unison, their flashes darting like lightning across his unadorned frame. The orchestra ceased, and a ripple of confusion passed through the elite gathering. This was no scheduled address, yet here he stood, ready to speak. In the hush that followed, The gentle swell of Cheshire's laughter broke the stillness. It came from Lady Clairvaughn herself, a clear chime of amusement and condescension. She arched a perfectly plucked brow and leaned toward her neighbor, her lips curving into a knowing smile. With the practiced poise of a seasoned society queen, she gestured toward the stranger as though offering him up for scrutiny, a lamb presented before a tribunal. Her soft laughter rippled through the gilded rows, an undercurrent of cruel delight in exposing the man's audacity. Around her, guests shifted uneasily. Some covered polite smiles with gloved hands. Others exchanged furtive glances, uncertain whether to laugh along or to shield their discomfort. The orchestra's musicians dipped their bows, their faces blank in the sudden stillness. Even Prince William paused mid-entrance, his expression flickering with question as the ballroom's attention condensed upon the man in plain clothes. Yet he did not flinch beneath Clairvaughn's barbed humor. Instead, he stood erect, his calm silhouette at odds with the fragile elegance all around him. The air, once thick with expectation of royal oration, now crackled with tension. Clairvaughn's gentle mockery had struck a chord, revealing the brittle underpinnings of a world built on surface and ceremony. Her laughter, meant to reinforce hierarchies and traditions, instead laid bare the fragility of privilege when faced with unvarnished authenticity. As her quiet amusement echoed amid the vaulted arches, the ballroom held its collective breath, sensing that the true question of the evening lay not in who wielded the gavel, but in who commanded integrity and compassion without the trappings of power. A ripple of discomfort spread from Lady Clairvaughn outward, a duchess caught mid-smile, a financier's wife stiffening in her seat, a press photographer lowering his camera as though unsure where to focus. The crystal goblets trembled on their silver trays, and in that trembling, an unspoken verdict took shape. Clairvaughn's laughter no longer rang with triumph, but with the hollow echo of dominance undercut by its own cruelty. The ballroom, suspended between tradition and transformation, awaited the stranger's next move, aware that his silence alone had already begun to unravel the carefully woven tapestry of gilded protocol. And in that pregnant pause, every guest felt the gentle, unstoppable shift. Old definitions of worth and belonging were cracking, driven apart by an unmannered but unbreakable presence that would soon redefine the meaning of grace. The hush that followed Lady Clairvaughn Sinclair's mocking laughter deepened until the grand ballroom felt impossibly vast and silent. Velvet-draped walls that once promised shelter to whispered alliances now seemed to close in, and the crystal chandeliers above glinted with a sharper tone, each prism a silent witness to the shifting tide of power. The casually dressed man by the microphone, still in dark jeans and a plain black t-shirt, stood unflinching, his posture unyielding as he met the vacuum of stares with quiet resolve. His calm presence, juxtaposed against the brittle grandeur of the room, radiated an integrity that words could not convey. From the fringes of the crowd, Prince William's measured footsteps sounded as he approached the stage, his midnight blue tuxedo a symbol of royal authority. He paused beside the man in the t-shirt, offering a discreet nod that conveyed recognition rather than reprimand. Cameras pivoted once more, capturing the prince's gesture and the stranger's steady acceptance of it. The moment spoke volumes. Here, courtesy and compassion overrode ceremony and status. The dancers of candlelight on gilded columns now illuminated a new hierarchy, one where genuine respect reigned over manufactured prestige. Behind the prince, the orchestra's conductor lowered his baton, sensing that this moment demanded silence instead of music. The audience, too, seemed suspended in choice, to resume polite conversation, to applaud tradition, or to heed the unspoken invitation to embrace authenticity. In the polished rows of chairs, guests shifted uneasily, some sinking back into their seats with ducked gazes, others sitting straighter, drawn by the stranger's silent magnetism. At the front of table one, Lady Clairvaughn settled her gloved hands in her lap, her silver gown's train pooling like liquid moonlight. Her diamond tiara caught the chandelier's glow in scattered bursts, but the sparkle felt hollow now, an adornment at odds with the man who refused to wear one. She drank deeply from her champagne flute, yet the bubbles offered no comfort. The applause that had once followed her every calculated flourish now seemed merely echoing ghosts, reminders of a former supremacy slipping through her fingers. On the raised dais, Prince William placed a respectful hand on the stranger's shoulder before stepping back. The prince's eyes scanned the room, gathering its attention without a single word spoken. A hush more profound than any spoken decree settled, as though the ballroom itself inhaled in anticipation. In that pregnant pause, every guest felt the question loom: who truly deserved the evening's gratitude and recognition? The man in the t-shirt inclined his head toward the prince in silent affirmation, then pivoted to face the assembly. His eyes, steady, unguarded, and keen, swept across the room, connecting with guests who met his gaze, unsettling their composure. The silence was not empty, but charged with possibility, a space where authenticity could flourish, where pretense would fall away under the weight of real character. Lady Claravon's heart pounded against her ribs, her practiced elegance fraying at the edges. She caught sight of a young aide in the corner, her face pale, lips parted as if to form words of introduction, but frozen by the stranger's unspoken authority. A line of photographers hesitated to raise their lenses, uncertain whether to document protocol or to capture the unfolding testament to quiet courage. Murky reflections shimmered in the polished surfaces of silver candelabras as the stranger's minimalism cast long shadows, each one carving away the trumped-up illusions that had long defined the gala's star attractions. Ornamental screens embroidered with monograms and crest-carved columns receded into the background, their gilded opulence dwarfed by the power of humility in action. Each breath in the room synchronized, the collective pulse attuned to the unspoken narrative, a tale of how one man, unannounced, unadorned, and unscripted, could realign the compass of an entire assembly. The ballroom's ornate plasterwork and silk tapestries seemed less vital now than the quiet strength emanating from the stranger's still silhouette. At the fringes, a few guests exchanged half-formed glances that spoke of reconsideration. A banker who had once judged the man's attire now straightened his shoulders. A duchess who had smirked at his audacity now sat forward with curiosity ignited. Even Lady Claravon, the embodiment of cultivated cool, felt the veneer of her superiority crack. The diamonds on her fingers felt heavier, the pearls at her throat colder, as she realized she had traded authenticity for a gilded cage. Then, as naturally as the chandeliers resumed their glow, the orchestra's conductor raised his baton. The first notes of a gentle waltz fell like soft petals, weaving through the still air and offering a melodic bridge between tradition and transformation. The man in the t-shirt stepped away from the microphone, his mission accomplished without a single spoken sentence. Guests rose, some clapping hesitantly, others with genuine warmth, yet all moved by a silent revolution of empathy and respect. Lady Claravon remained seated for a moment longer, her silver gown catching the candlelight in wavering patterns. Across the room, she saw the stranger blend seamlessly into the crowd. No fanfare, no flourish, yet leaving a resonance far deeper than any grand gesture. In that silent testament, the grand ballroom rediscovered its true purpose: to celebrate how genuine humanity can outshine any chandelier's sparkle, and how the quiet poise of one man can speak 1,000 words, reshaping a legacy in the process. The grand ballroom's harmony shifted as Prince William concluded his unexpected gesture of solidarity. Where once crystal glasses tinkled in rehearsed applause, now a robust, heartfelt ovation rose, echoing off gilded pilasters and crystal prisms alike. The stranger in the black t-shirt, KeanuReeves, nodded graciously at the prince before stepping back into the flow of guests. Cameras swiveled to capture this new focal point, an unadorned man whose simple presence had redirected the evening's currents. Amid the renewed applause, Lady Clairvaughn Sinclair attempted to reclaim her composure. She lifted her diamond-rimmed champagne flute, offering a poised sip as she surveyed the room. Yet the echoes of genuine admiration unsettled her practiced equilibrium. Around her, high officials exchanged brisk nods, socialites murmured compliments, and philanthropists tapped contact details into their devices, each interaction now tinged with mention of Reeves's act rather than her own. The air, once charged by prestige, now brimmed with an undercurrent of authenticity. Clairvaughn turned to the banker seated next to her, forcing a serene smile. He greeted her with a curt nod, eyes already drifting back to the center of the ballroom, where Reeves navigated clusters of well-wishers. The banker's polite attention, once unshakably hers, had been quietly wrenched away by a presence immune to hierarchy. Lady Clairvaughn felt her pearl-lined cape grow heavier, as though each pearl had absorbed a drop of her influence. Across the table, the orchestra resumed a gentle waltz, its notes threading through conversations like golden ribbons. Waiters glided between tables, offering petit fours and crystal decanters of vintage champagne. Yet the buzz no longer centered on who had reserved which seat or who had outbid whom. Instead, guests spoke in earnest tones of the power of humility, of generosity unannounced, and of leadership that spoke through action rather than proclamation. Each phrase wound its way back to Reeves's unshaken poise, his refusal to be diminished by snide remarks or the glittering trappings of the event. Lady Clairvaughn studied Reeves from across the room. He stood without fanfare, his dark jeans and plain t-shirt contrasting sharply with opulent gowns and tailored tuxedos. Yet around him, the brightest smiles bloomed and eyes lit with admiration. The sight both tormented and fascinated her, a reminder that status earned through spectacle paled beside respect earned through integrity. She lifted her glass again, this time in silent tribute, though resentment nipped at her composure. As the waltz reached its crescendo, Prince William re-emerged on the dais. His presence recalibrated the room's attention for the formal toasts ahead. Guests straightened in their seats, lifting flutes in anticipation. Clairvaughn's hand trembled imperceptibly as she raised her glass. But beneath the veneer of tradition, a newfound humility took root in her chest, one that whispered of power redefined. In that moment, the grand ballroom stood transformed. Crystal and silk still gleamed, but their brilliance no longer overshadowed the quiet glow of genuine humanity. KeanuReeves's unshaken poise had illuminated a new path, one where dignity, not decorum, held sway. And as toasts were offered and pledged gifts acknowledged, every raised glass celebrated not a single patron's prominence, but the unspoken truth that true grace resided in the steadfast heart willing to stand firm, jeans and all, amid the most glittering of halls. The soft murmur of applause and the gentle swell of the orchestra's waltz had scarcely settled when the atmosphere shifted again, this time with a sharper edge that cut through the room's elegance. Lady Clairvaughn Sinclair, seated at table 1, lifted her chin and allowed her eyes to settle upon the casually dressed figure who had so audaciously commandeered the evening's admiration. From her vantage, she studied his indifference to glamour, the absence of a tailored jacket, the plain black t-shirt, the unpolished sneakers that tapped lightly on marble. In that moment, she resolved to restore the balance of power. As the prince's attention flickered between dignitaries and donors, Clairvaughn seized her opportunity. She leaned forward, the train of her silver gown pooling like liquid moonlight around her stool. With the deliberate grace of a practiced provocateur, she slid her fork through a delicate salmon soufflé, the tines glinting in candlelight. Nearby, the butler paused with a silver tray of petit fours, the soft click of polished shoes mounting the dais. Clairvaughn's gesture was subtle but crisp, an unspoken challenge aimed squarely at the man in plain clothes. Her next movement was a masterclass in cultivated disdain. She tapped the rim of her crystal goblet with a manicured fingernail, the sound crystalline yet brittle. The ripple of reflected light across her diamond cuff contrasted starkly with the unadorned wrist of the stranger. Eyes narrowed behind elegantly arched brows, she allowed herself a faint, condescending smile, an unspoken question of belonging that hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Her gaze carried the weight of history, of countless galas where her wit had cut sharper than any blade, and where protocol was an art form she alone had mastered. Around her, guests shifted. A banker's wife to her left brushed a wisp of hair from her cheek, eyes flickering toward the man in black. A tech entrepreneur on her right straightened his posture, uncertain whether to follow Claravon's lead or to be drawn into the current of unexpected sympathy for the outsider. The orchestra's strings hummed softly, unaware that their next bow would follow an entirely new script. The chandelier prisms danced in time with the gathering tension, each refraction a silent herald of the turbulence Claravon's poised provocation had unleashed. Despite her efforts, the stranger did not react. He did not look up, did not shift in his chair, did not even tighten his grip on the water goblet before him. His indifference was an unspoken rebuke, a quiet proclamation that dignity was not conferred by fine silks or whispered alliances, but by the steadiness of character under scrutiny. This refusal to rise to the bait was Claravon's greatest frustration. The absence of any visible sign of defeat or discomfort spoke louder than any retort could. In the gallery beyond the VIP tables, photographers hesitated. Flashes lingered on Claravon's composed profile, then flicked to capture the stranger's unwavering serenity. Journalists scribbled notes at the edges of their programs, no longer merely chronicling philanthropy, but witnessing a tableau of social upheaval. The guardian ranks of ambassadors and titled patrons felt a tremor of uncertainty. If a single woman's cutting remark could leave her rival untouched, perhaps their own cultivated dominance was equally vulnerable. Claravon's lips curved into a tighter line as she watched the man's placid repose, an imperceptible nod of satisfaction that the battle she had so meticulously prepared for had been rendered moot. The very tools of her craft, social expectation, whispered hierarchy, coded insults, fell silent under the weight of his calm dismissal. The ballroom's grand architecture, once a backdrop for her theatrics, now served as the witness to her unexpected defeat. Even Prince William, poised at the edge of the stage, sensed the altered current. He paused in his remarks, his gaze drifting toward the pair at table one. The hush that followed Claravon's unreturned provocation rippled outward, sweeping through the rows of silver-rimmed glasses and silk linens. It was a hush pregnant with possibility, the moment when pretense gives way to authenticity, when the carefully scripted performance of high society is upstaged by the unspoken power of inner grace. As the orchestra prepared its next movement, the ballroom seemed to breathe again, but with a different cadence. The notes that followed would carry a new resonance, charged by the tension unleashed at table one. Claravon, ever the consummate hostess, settled back into her poised stillness, dagger-sharp smile intact, but the sparkle in her eyes had shifted, from the confident shine of command to the uncertain glint of one who has glimpsed a force beyond her control. And at the center of it all stood the man in the t-shirt, silent, unmoved, his very quietude reverberating through the grandest of halls. A cutting remark turned harmless, and an evening forever changed. Amid the changing tide, the orchestra launched into a soft interlude, violin harmonies weaving through the grand hall like drifting veils of sound. Candles flickered, and reflections danced across the polished floor, yet the energy remained charged with unspoken truths. Lady Claravon Sinclair, seated at table one, maintained her flawless posture, lifting her champagne flute in a graceful arc. But beneath her polished veneer, her eyes flicked repeatedly to the man in the black t-shirt, who sat with serene composure, a quiet center amid the swirling currents of privilege and pretense. Across the ballroom, guests recalibrated their attitudes. A famed art patron who had once turned his nose at casual dress now leaned forward in his seat, curiosity eclipsing snobbery. A young heiress at the next table discreetly slipped off her satin gloves, her fingers drumming lightly on the table as though eager to shed formalities. Even the caterers navigating the aisles sensed the shift, pausing mid-step as murmurs of respect and intrigue rippled through the crowd. Prince William, observing this metamorphosis from the dais, acknowledged the unspoken change with a subtle nod. He raised his goblet, inviting the room to join him in a toast, not to title or wealth, but to genuine generosity and quiet courage. Glasses lifted, and for the first time, the clinking resonated with authenticity rather than obligation. In that moment, Lady Claravon's diamond tiara felt heavier upon her brow, each stone a reminder of the hierarchy she had long commanded, and the humility she was now forced to reckon with. She lowered her eyes to her own reflection in the crystal stem, catching sight of the woman she had once been, impeccable, untouchable, impervious. Yet as the candlelight flickered, she recognized something else in her gaze, the realization that true influence cannot be donned like a gown, but must be lived and earned. As the toast concluded and cameras flashed to capture the newfound unity, the man in the t-shirt rose quietly. No spotlight awaited him, only the respectful hush of a room transformed. He offered a gentle bow to the prince, then turned toward Lady Claravon. Their eyes met for the first time since her cutting remark, and she held his gaze without the shield of a sneer. In his calm expression, she saw no triumph, only the quiet grace of one who understood that respect is granted through kindness and integrity, not entitlement. Then, as unobtrusively as he had altered the evening's course, he merged into the gathering crowd, his presence lingering like the final note of a lyrical symphony. The guests watched him go, some with admiration, others with introspection. Lady Claravon remained seated until her table-mates rose for the dance that followed, then joined them on the floor. Each step a small act of reconciliation with a world where quiet empathy now held greater sway than the brightest chandelier. In the grand ballroom of Buckingham Hall, the night's legacy was sealed not by grand speeches or headline bids, but by a simple truth echoed in every heart, that the power of one man's silent dignity could outshine the most opulent display of privilege, transforming a gala of opulence into a gathering of genuine humanity. The grand ballroom's ambience settled into an expectant hush as the orchestra's waltz tapered off, leaving only the soft rustle of silk and the faint tinkle of crystal. Amid the shimmering masses of couture and the gleam of metal-adorned uniforms, the casually clad figure moved with unassuming confidence. His dark jeans and simple black t-shirt stood in stark contrast to the surrounding pageantry, yet his presence lit the room more brightly than any jeweled tiara. As he navigated the beaded draperies and gilded archways, guests parted politely to allow his passage, their curious glances trailing in his wake. At table one, Lady Claravon Sinclair closed her eyes for a brief moment, steadying her breath. Her polished silver gown, once the centerpiece of every snapshot, now felt like armor that weighed heavily upon her shoulders. The delicate pearls lining her cape rippled slightly as she sat poised, palms resting lightly upon the damask tablecloth. Yet beneath her composed exterior, her pulse had quickened, her carefully controlled expression holding at the brink of uncertainty. She recognized that the man who had accepted her mocking remark with calm defiance carried within him a force greater than any social stratagem she had ever wielded. Guests nearby exchanged awed whispers. The billionaire art collector who had dismissed casual attire as gauche now found himself leaning forward, fascinated by the stranger's understated charisma. A famed diplomat, known for his stoic reserve, reached unconsciously for his watch, as though time itself had sharpened its focus upon the man's silent poise. A circle of philanthropists, women in sculpted gowns and men in bespoke tuxedos, huddled in murmured conversation, speculating on who this outsider might be and what silent statement his composure had delivered. Meanwhile, on the raised dais where Prince William had retreated after his unexpected toast, the eyes of the ballroom converged into a single point of stillness. The prince's back stood straight, his silhouette framed by the towering columns of the stage. His subtle nod toward the unannounced guest spoke volumes, an endorsement of quiet dignity and genuine character over inherited privilege. In response, the man in jeans paused beneath the chandelier's glow. He raised one hand in a gentle wave. No grand gesture of conquest, but a serene acknowledgement of the kingly authority that had been bestowed upon him, not by lineage, but by the simple act of gracious resilience. That moment crystallized the transformation sweeping through Buckingham Hall. The grand ballroom, once a theater of opulence and hierarchical display, now resonated with the purity of silent admiration. The chandeliers refracted this new light, scattering rainbows across the polished marble, as if the very crystals celebrated a shift from spectacle to substance. The assembled guests, held in the spell of this unstated lesson, felt their own posture's ease, no longer striving for ostentation, but drawn toward authenticity. Lady Clairvaugh's breath settled into a steadier rhythm. She met the stranger's calm gaze from across the room, and in that unspoken exchange, she glimpsed her own vulnerabilities, the hollowness of accolades earned through display rather than deeds, the fragility of authority divorced from genuine empathy. It was the sterile corroding of tradition by truth, the realization that no gown, no tiara, no perfectly orchestrated entrance could cloak the power of quiet virtue. As the orchestra resumed with a gentle reprise, the man in the t-shirt slipped away from the multinational crowd, merging seamlessly into a group of young aides and volunteers who now felt emboldened. These aides, once mere shadows behind the scenes, now stood taller, their own faces alight with the possibility of recognition founded on merit rather than rank. The ripple effect of one man's unshaken poise reached beyond the ballroom's gilded walls, touching each heart with the promise that dignity need not wear a mask. In the wake of his passage, the grand ballroom embraced a softer glow, the hues of humanity restored. Guests raised their glasses not to the next headline bid, but to the enduring power of character. Lady Clairvaughn, for her part, remained seated for a moment longer, her back straight, her expression composed, but her heart forever altered. Across the hall, the stranger's silhouette faded into conversation clusters, yet his stillness lingered in every mirrored pane and polished surface, a testament that the most profound statements are often made in silence, and that true grace stands unwavering, even in the most glittering of arenas. The moment the first lot was announced, the grand ballroom's tension heightened as though the chandeliers themselves held their breath. A pristine podium stood at the room's center, flanked by ascending rows of eager guests. At Clairvaughn Sinclair's place setting, she adjusted her pearl-trimmed cape, ready to reaffirm her supremacy in bid after practice bid. Yet as the auctioneer's gavels poised to strike, a different current rippled through the hall, one that drew every eye toward the casually dressed stranger who had already rewritten the evening script. The lot up for bidding was a rare piece of contemporary art, a limited edition canvas by a celebrated painter whose works usually commanded seven figures at private sales. Traditionally, this would have been Clairvaughn's stage. She would outbid colony governors, hedge fund titans, and oil heirs in rapid succession, her paddle flashing like a metronome of power. Tonight, however, she sensed a shift. Where once her presence electrified the room, now a quiet curiosity hummed around the man in dark jeans and a simple black t-shirt. As the auctioneer began, opening bid at £50,000, the ballroom's polite applause fell hollow. The stranger's hand rose, almost imperceptibly, and his paddle flickered with the warm glow of the chandelier above. Clairvaughn's heart sputtered. A competitor had emerged from nowhere. A sharp intake of breath spread through the front rows. Whispers echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. She swallowed and lifted her own paddle, her polished smile slipping into a practiced tightness as the auctioneer called, 60,000? Again, his paddle rose. The gavels and glasses chimed in contradiction. There should have been silence at this point in the ritual, but instead, the room thrummed with surprise. Clairvaughn's mind raced. Who was this upstart, this unannounced bidder who dared to outbid her? Quick glances traded around the room. Patrons leaned forward, cameras pivoted, and even Prince William paused mid-applause, watching the scene with keen interest. With each incremental call, 70, 90,000, the stranger's paddle remained aloft, his composure unwavering. Clairvaughn forced her hand to rise alongside, each motion draining her of the effortless control she had always wielded. When the auctioneer's voice crescendoed to 100,000 pounds, "Do I hear 110?" An audible hush fell. Clairvaughn's paddle wavered as she contemplated ceding the victory to a man who wore no tie, no tailcoat, only the quiet certainty that came from knowing the worth of one's convictions. In the hush, the stranger's final bid rang out, 110,000 pounds. The gavel fell with a definitive clap that reverberated through vaulted beams and polished floors. For a heartbeat, the ballroom held its collective breath, then erupted in applause that rolled like a wave. First polite, then genuine, until even the gilded corners of the hall seemed to ring with approval. Clairvaughn's throat constricted as cameras swarmed the stranger, capturing his triumphant yet humble nod to Prince William. As the applause subsided, the auctioneer gestured toward the stage where a staff member placed a marker beside the lot's catalog number. Sold. Prince William stepped forward, extending his hand to the stranger in acknowledgement, an unprecedented honor that eclipsed every headline Clairvaughn had once monopolized. Reporters jostled to position their microphones, asking questions about the bidder's identity, his taste, and his motivations. Yet he remained composed, offering no more than a brief, polite smile before reassuring the staff that the full payment would be handled directly through the foundation office. In that instant, the man in the t-shirt transformed from curious anomaly to central figure in the evening's narrative. Journalists murmured of charitable intent and whispered that the proceeds would benefit orphanages abroad. Philanthropists exchanged impressed nods, and even seasoned society figures felt their assumptions challenged. Generosity needed no fanfare, and influence no embellishment. Clairvaughn watched from the front row, her silver gown shimmering with the ambient glow of chandeliers. Yet her aura dimmed by the stark realization that she had been outpaced not by wealth alone, but by genuine compassion coupled with quiet integrity. She lifted her champagne flute in what felt like the final act of a fading performance, toasting the stranger's victory as cameras captured the moment for tomorrow's headlines. And as she lowered the glass, the applause had already drifted toward the man in jeans, proof that in a room built on opulence, a single act of unadorned generosity could claim the brightest spotlight of all. The chandelier light shimmered like liquid honor as the applause for the final auction lot cascaded across the grand ballroom. Where once the polished mahogany lectern bore the weight of rehearsed speeches, it now stood witness to the ripples of genuine generosity. KeanuReeves, still clad in dark jeans and a simple black t-shirt, had completed a feat no gilded tycoon or titled patron could claim. He had redirected the evening's narrative from pageantry to purpose. Yet the night was far from over. Prince William rose once more, ascending the dais with the grace of a man who understood the power of both tradition and transformation. A hush fell, the room's brilliance refracting in crystalline silence as the prince raised a slender hand. The refined murmur of conversation faded, replaced by the collective heartbeat of expectant guests. Lady Clairvaughn Sinclair sat at table one, the satin of her silver gown rustling beneath her poised shoulders. She offered a measured nod to William's gesture, her diamond cuff catching the candlelight in fleeting sparkles. But even she could not resist the magnetic pull of the moment. The evening's true centerpiece, not her polished pageantry, but the man whose quiet dignity had captivated them all. Prince William's voice, warm and resonant, filled the vaulted hall. Tonight, we have witnessed an extraordinary act of kindness, one that transcends titles, pedigree, and protocol. Our guest, who prefers no limelight, has not only outbid us at auction, but has shown us how quiet compassion can outshine the brightest diamonds. A ripple of applause followed, more heartfelt than any that had come before. Cameras pivoted, capturing Reeves's calm smile as he inclined his head. There are no grand gestures, no showy bows, only a simple bow of the head that spoke volumes. As a token of our gratitude, the prince continued, I am honored to invite this guest, an unassuming champion of philanthropy, to join me in co-chairing the Royal Horizon Foundation. Together, we will ensure that every pound raised tonight changes lives for years to come. Another wave of approval surged through the crowd, punctuated by the clink of crystal and the soft rustle of silk. Lady Claire Vaughan felt the warmth of the moment press against the cool pearls at her throat, a reminder that true influence thrived beyond the walls of etiquette. Reeves stepped forward to stand beside the prince. His casual attire contrasted with the midnight blue tails and diamond-spangled gowns around him. Yet the respect lavished upon him was as brilliant as any royal decoration. The prince slipped a simple lapel pin into Reeves's t-shirt, a discreet insignia of the foundation, while Reeves offered a gentle handshake in return. That handshake, unguarded and sincere, carried the promise of joint stewardship and a shared mission of global uplift. Lady Claire Vaughan, rising from her seat, felt each step resonate, a reconciliation between polished tradition and authentic purpose. She joined the standing ovation, glasses raised in salute to the unlikely co-chair. The orchestra, cued by the prince's final nod, launched into a triumphant overture whose notes soared above the assembled dignitaries and philanthropists. It was a melody of unity, underscoring the royal seal upon an alliance formed at the intersection of compassion and leadership. As the music swelled, Reeves and Prince William exchanged a few quiet words. No microphones, no cameras, only the respectful murmurs of two men united by a vision greater than themselves. The ballroom's grand mirrors reflected the scene, capturing the silhouette of a casually dressed hero alongside a future monarch. In that reflection lay the true spectacle of the night, a testament that genuine kindness, when wielded with humility and resolve, could outshine any chandelier and outlast any headline. Lady Claire Vaughan returned to her table as the gala transitioned into its final celebration. Champagne flowed anew, and dancers took to the floor beneath the glittering glass canopy. Yet even within the swirl of celebration, the memory of Reeves's quiet coronation lingered, a crown of respect fashioned not from jewels, but from unwavering integrity. And in that lingering glow, every guest recognized a simple truth, that the most enduring legacies are not measured by what we display, but by how kindly we act when all eyes are upon us. The grand ballroom's final strains of music drifted into gentle silence as the gala moved toward its close. Guests lingered beneath the crystal chandeliers, their conversations now tempered by the night's lessons in humility and heart. KeanuReeves, the evening's unassuming hero, had stepped away from the center stage to circulate among tables, accepting quiet words of gratitude, nodding with genuine interest at personal stories, and offering soft encouragement to fledgling philanthropists. His presence, though unadorned by finery, emanated a warmth that transformed every handshake into a moment of connection. Lady Claire Vaughan Sinclair watched from a corner of the ballroom, her silver gown shimmering like a beacon of reflection rather than command. She observed Reeves move through clusters of guests, listening to an aide nurse describe a new school funded by the Royal Horizon Foundation, laughing with a tech innovator whose startup she had championed years before, and pausing to include a young volunteer whose eyes burned with the eagerness of youth. In each interaction, he spoke little yet conveyed profound respect, letting his attentive presence fill the space where words might falter. The room, once a theater of opulence and whispered one-upmanship, now felt like a gathering of purpose. Diners who had arrived to bid their fortunes on museum pieces now clinked glasses in celebration of scholarships awarded and medical centers rebuilt. The grand marble floors, trodden by heels and polished shoes, now held footprints of shared resolve rather than solitary ambition. Even the portraits of past patrons lining the silk-draped walls seemed to lean forward, their painted visages offering silent approval to the new standard of leadership on display. Reeves paused beside a cluster of young aides, his casual stance framed by the polished finery around him. He listened as they spoke of plans for post-gala follow-up visits to funded projects, nodding as they sketched out expansion ideas. Then, with a slow, unobtrusive step, he wove through the guests until he reached Lady Clairvon's side. She turned, her posture immaculate, expecting either a perfunctory bow or a curt nod. Instead, he looked her in the eye and offered a simple, almost imperceptible smile, a gesture of mutual recognition. In that silent exchange, Clairvon felt the weight of every pearl on her cape shift from adornment to adornment's contrast. She realized that her own years of curated presence had taught her to speak through glances and gestures. Yet tonight, she had been outspoken by silence itself. Reeves's refusal to play by the old rules, his steadfast calm and quiet consideration, had spoken more profoundly than any grand announcement or lavish gesture. A butler stepped forward with a silver tray bearing petit fours, and Reeves selected a small raspberry tart, his only concession to formality. He offered her the tray with a nod, and she accepted, feeling the tart's weight both in her hand and as a symbol of passing the torch. No words were exchanged, none were needed. The final silence of the evening, the unscripted, unhurried cadence of genuine humanity, filled the ballroom more deeply than any speech or fanfare could have. As the last guest filed out under the watchful archways and polished marble steps, the staff prepared to dismantle the crystal fountains and roll up the carpets. Yet the memory of one man's simple acts of compassion lingered in every corner. In the hushed aftermath, the grand ballroom stood as a testament not to wealth or privilege, but to the enduring power of silence that speaks volumes, reminding all who had witnessed it that the greatest influence often arrives quietly and changes the world with a single, unassuming act.